Welcome to Jester's Garage. If you're a fan of this channel, then you know that I love my 46 Chevy Pickups. And you know that there's an artistic side of me. You put both of those together, and I'm bound and determined to cut up a 46 Chevy Pickup. After I had done everything I could to the original frame, I knew I had to start over. So I decided to make a space frame. That was back in '95 when I started it. I've been contemplating it for a while, but I pulled the trigger in '95. The old frame wouldn't do. I knew I wanted something light and strong. And I knew I wanted independent suspension all the way around. The design I came up with uses rectangular tubing. Most of the bulk of the weight is in the middle. It's got triangulations. It's basically a space frame. The sizes I used were 1.5 by 3, 1.5 by 1.5, 1.5 by 3/4, and 3/4 inch square. And I went down from the 2 down to the 1.5 and from the 4 down to the 3 because I figured it'd be a space frame with more tubing lengths in it. So why go terribly big? Obviously, I wanted the chassis as low as possible, so kind of given a figure of about 6 inches, I built a platform out of wood. So starting with some 2x6s and a 1/2 inch piece of plywood, I made a 4x8 fixture, painted it white, and then drew my lines with some black ink pen. The chassis starts with this bulkhead. My driver's compartment stops right here. That's pretty obvious. 1.5 inch, 3 top and bottom, 1.5 inch square right here. And the bulk of the weight is in the center. So I've got 1.5 inch right here, and it goes up and around the transmission, and it's probably 24 inches wide in the front around the engine. Everything's low and flat. The bottom of this car will be smooth. From about, it looks like about 3 feet wide here, it goes back 4 feet roughly and wraps around the gas tank area. And then I've got 1.5 inches on either side here that triangulates in, and I've got 1.5 inches by 3 from the very bottom of the bulkhead up to here. And that rounds off the back. I'm gonna end up putting some more metal in here and down through here and making sure all this is tied together so that my moments are not gonna be twisty. The idea is all of my nodes and so forth are going to work together to make a very, very strong frame. So as I was thinking this thing through, I was going to make sure I had plenty of uppers and lowers and plenty of triangulation and a lot of boxing in with sheet metal. The center of the chassis has an upper and a lower, and they merge right here at the secondary bulkhead, and then they come forward until they meet the cowl area. At this point of the cowl, the upper and the lower are on top of each other. It's a little bit farther forward that the lower goes in for the area of the lower suspension, and the upper actually goes out to clear the engine and tie in with the C4 suspension. The earlier renditions of my drawings, I was going to build my own suspension out of some chromoly, and I'd done some studying on, there was all the books, and it was probably about 5 years after I built this chassis, I stumbled across a wrecked C4. So one of my buddies knew a guy that wrecked his 87 Roadster, and I had an opportunity to buy what was left. Pretty much everything. But it was bent and twisted, hit really bad, it was destroyed. But it had everything I needed. It had motor, transmission, differential, brakes all the way around, steering, cooling system, all the other supporting systems, and wiring harness, everything. So I used a donor car approach on this. It kept my costs down tremendously, and it gave me something I knew was going to handle as well as a brand new 87 Corvette was in the time. This car was only about 13 years old when I bought it, so it was not quite state of the art, but it wasn't that far into the C5 era. So I felt like it was the best way to go. And anyway, so I ended up taking that car apart in about a 30-day period, and then got rid of all the carcass and everything. Started doing all the XYZ reverse engineering, so I knew exactly, for the most part, where all of my holes and brackets and everything were supposed to be based on that wrecked vet. Surprisingly enough, it all came out quite well, because once I got everything all fixtured up and I did some stiff arm instead of shocks and springs, I just put an area, just welded a piece of pipe in there to keep everything at static height. Took it down to Les Schwabb. They moved it around a little bit, but I didn't have to move any holes. That's the main thing. And it was actually pretty doggone close when it comes to, it wasn't like grossly off or I was right up against the limit anywhere. It landed really well. So after that, it was just a matter of making some motor mounts and of course the transmission mount in the back. And then to mount that differential, I did a little bit of boxing right here and built myself a couple nice little welded in tabs that go this way. They're fairly heavy. And what that did was that connected this bat wing across here. And on a C4, it has a C channel made out of aluminum that clamps around here and also bolts the transmission. And what I did was, knowing that I wasn't going to have enough room in this area for it, I went ahead and built another set of tabs here and built this drop cross member that bolts right on top of here. Got a little bit of a shim here going on. So it's a 4-point mount, which isn't bad really. It does the job, and it keeps that thing right where it needs to be. You can kind of see what I did with my transmission mount in the back. I built a C channel for it as well, and then it mounts to a lower configuration, if you can see that in there. See there? So it's got two polyurethane bushings on a stand, on a riser of sorts. Coming off of this 1.5 inch square that I went back like that, I basically did a little bit of a break right here, and I think there's a little bit of a swell right here. And what that does is that this brings this in this way. There's a little bit of an angle this way. This one's correct. The width here for these this 4-link is exactly where it needs to be, as according to the C4. Just the placement of everything. I put it exactly where that wrecked Corvette was telling me to put it, according to this frame that I built. So it's working out pretty good. There's the factory connection for the rear shock mount down low. And this would be the correct location for the upper mount. So what I did was I built these two tabs, which are very similar to each other, just a little bit different in the cut. But so this is where my shock will go, and the rear springs are in there. All I got to do is put my shocks in the back, and this thing's sprung. It's ready to go. The factory tank would be in this area, but I wanted to put it down low inside here. So I designed this tank, and I had one of my boat building buddies cut it, and I actually cut the thing up, and he tigged it together for me, so it turned out quite well. It's kind of a diamond shape. It's pretty cool. Uppers and lowers here wasn't that hard to do. Of course, they're not boxed in or welded the rest of the way, but the tabs straight and forward. This one here, this is like a 1/2 inch piece that I just custom cut and cleaned it all up. You can see how the shims ended up being on the money. There's nothing weird about them, like fat in the front, thin in the back or anything. This thing's actually doggone close. I got to deal with how I'm going to get my monoleaf through there and hook up my shock, but that's really not that big a deal. It's all about fabrication. I used the original Corvette fan, and then I built this shroud to kind of go up to the radiator. So this is the factory radiator, and it's the factory fan, and then it's a custom shroud. Starting with the fuse panel, I built this little box so I could get to it from the outside. Actually, I wanted to be able to get to it from, you know, maybe if the hood opened up this way or the door, either way, whatever it might be, I wanted to be able to get to the fuses. And then most of all of my electronic stuff is pretty easy to get to. I got to do some sorting down here, obviously. You can see most of my relays and so forth are hooked to this side. Connections and everything. This will all be covered up when I'm done. You won't see a single thing. But it's all 87 Corvette. I remember sitting behind a gauge just like this. Late 83, I was working at the Chevrolet dealership. I started up the first 84 Corvette that came into Lewiston. I was just a kid. I was working up there changing oil and doing other minor repairs. I had an opportunity to sit in a brand new red car. It still had the plastic on the seats. I fired it up and I saw this thing. And I know most people think this is kind of glitzy and everything, but I thought it was so cool. So I'm going to use all of this stuff. I built a little glove box. I want to try to make this whole thing not square when it's all done. It'll have a whole bunch of kind of mid-year 63 to 67 cockpit look. So I'll do a bunch of rounding. I've got some illustrations on that. I wish it was a stick, but if it had been a stick, it would have been almost unaffordable for me. So I've got the Dana 36 instead of a 44, but that's okay. It'll get me where I need to go. It'll be a fun little car. Truck. Sort of, kind of. Well, that's what I have for this episode of Jester's Garage Tale of Two 46s. On the next episode, I'm probably going to go over the exhaust system. That's kind of a story in itself. I wanted to build a tri-Y, and it had to fit a specific size, and I ended up building all the tools to build all my merge collectors. And it might be a small video, but I think it's worth dedicating one full video just to the exhaust system on this thing. Well, that's all we got today on the Tale of Two 46s here at Jester's Garage. If you like this crazy little project, give me a thumbs up and a comment. We'll be sure to tell you the rest of the story in upcoming episodes. Till then, God bless and happy hot rodding.